Well, good morning, and welcome to the journey. What? It's a good morning. Yeah, they did. I like that. That's my son who did that. Way to go, dude. Woo! That's awesome. Well, yeah, hey. Okay, so I got to admit, who watched any playoff games yesterday? Okay, who watched the 49ers just grate some cheese yesterday? I mean, that was like grate cream and cut the cheese all at the same time. Can you say that? Anyway, it was just awesome. But we were there at the beginning of the game, and I just got to admit, I was nervous. I was nervous because they're an extension of me, you know, and I'm sitting there just, oh man, what? Oh, okay, TV better work right and everything. And Michael was there, and the family was thinking I'm kind of crazy. And but if you're on my Facebook friends, you hate me because I was all over Facebook. But anyway, what an awesome game, and you know, I'm very happy. I am very happy today. So I do want to say that I want to wish my best regards to Seahawks today. Because, you know, I mean, either way, the 49ers are going to be hunting birds next week. So, I don't know. But anyway, so here we go. But I just want to say I appreciate every one of you for being here today. And if you are here for the first time, thank you for coming. We really hope that you enjoy it. And we want you to know that wherever you're at on your spiritual journey, doesn't matter. We're glad that you're here. And you are welcome to be with us all the time. We do, this church is for people like yourselves. It's a church for the spiritually curious, and we want everyone here to feel comfortable and to enjoy it and to get something out of it. So I hope you do today. I want to say a big thank you to Anne Marie Carlton, where'd she go? She was here. Nursery. She's helping nursery today. Okay. She spoke last week and did a great job. And then congratulations to everyone who was baptized. So just an awesome week celebration last Sunday. Well, this morning we start a new series. And by the way, youth, you're staying in today. We're starting a new series called Lost in Translation. Has anyone ever had an experience where you feel like something has gotten lost in translation? Anybody? A few people, you know, maybe information gets twisted, false conclusions get drawn, people get upset, you know. Anyone ever experienced that something gets lost in translation and you're just tweaked, okay? Yeah, you know, and usually it happens, typically you want to communicate something to someone through somebody else. You know, that's when it happens the worst. But if you're been married for any length of time, I think you've experienced something getting lost in translation. Okay, am I right about that? You know, especially if you try to communicate in front of a TV, right? You know, case in point, or a football game. Wendy, my wife, dinner's ready, and you know, she wants us to come to the table. Okay, great. What I hear when I'm watching the game is dinner's ready, let me bring something to you so you can keep cheering on the 49ers, you know? And something gets lost in translation. If you're a teenager trying to communicate with your parents or vice versa, things get lost in translation. You know, son, will you take out the trash? Sure. 3.5 hours later, the trash is still sitting there. You know, son, I told you to take out the trash. Oh, today? You meant that today? Okay. You know, things get lost in translation. If you've ever visited or traveled to another country and experienced another culture, you would find that things get lost in translation. You know, when I was in Africa, I was walking along in some painfully hot village in the middle of nowhere in Africa with my translator, of all people, okay? And lots of people walk around, and as we were walking down this dirt road, he just kind of slowly reached over to hold my hand. And in that culture, men holding hands is actually a sign of friendship, nothing more. I thought he was making a move on me. And I'm like, you know, what are you doing, dude? You know, and you know, I almost I didn't get violent, but, you know, it was just a little, when you're from San Francisco, you get a little sensitive about certain things. And so anyway, but things get lost in translation. But the phrase lost in translation technically has to do with something being communicated in one form or language to another form or to another language, okay? And then either back to the original language or to a third one, okay? And by the time it's over, something in the original meaning or something in the original details gets lost, simply because of the fact that languages or forms or interpretations and styles differ. And so things get lost in translation. And so if you fall asleep this morning, or if you're tracking the Seahawks game on your iPhone while I speak, something might get lost in translation, okay? But before we go any further, I want to show a little video clip that we've shown once here before, okay? And I think it's worth showing at least once a year. If you tend to get uptight or overly, religious about things, relax, take a deep breath, loosen up, and don't take it too seriously. But anyway, enjoy it. We're showing the first one, the Jesus one.
Do you think he can fly?
Shh, here he comes. Well, all right. Now it's time for me to tell you all what you've done wrong since I last saw you. And don't try and hide, because I'm Jesus. I will find you. Let's start with you, Peter. You lied to your mother the other day. Andrew, you said a naughty word when you hit your finger with the hammer. James, you laughed at him when he hit his finger. Moving right along, John, you drank too much wine the other night. Not way too much, just enough to make me angry. Matthew, we fell asleep in church, didn't we? Yes, we did. And Thomas, you were slow dancing a little too close with that girlfriend of yours. Let's see, and you, I forgot your name, so you're off the hook for now. Philip, I saw you smoking a cigarette behind that big rock the other day. Thaddeus, I hate to say I saw you stick up your middle finger at someone who cut you off when you were riding your camel. Benjamin, you aren't wearing your WWJD bracelet. Jacob, I don't mind you saying my name, but not after you stub your toe. And Frank, you know what you did. I just can't repeat it because I'm Jesus. All right, all you sinners, come with me. It's time to pay the piper.
Man, it was only one cigarette.
I heard that. Look at all these sinners. All right, listen up. Listen to me. I'm Jesus. Listen to what I have to say. I have done many wonderful things. I have healed many people of diseases. I have performed many miracles so that I can tell you this. You're all evil. There is no hope. That's it. Thank you.
I love that video clip. The reason I chose to show it is because, number one, it's funny, all right? Yeah, number one. But also, I think it's an illustration of something that gets lost in translation, all right? And here's what I mean by that. The Jesus shown in this clip is not the Jesus that's portrayed in the New Testament, all right? You following me that? Okay. Something was, in this case, intentionally lost in translation. And I will also say that I think that what many people experience or see or perceive in churches today is not what the church was like in the beginning, nor was it intended to be along the way. Something has been lost in translation. You following? Well, all right now, okay? Let me tell you what you all done wrong, because we're in church, and we do things like that in church. Those are the kinds of things, that the impressions I think that we have. And so, but now, I know that my words have kind of set up something already, but as best and as honest as you can, what are some of the first things that come to your mind when you hear, positive, negative, or otherwise, when you hear the word church? And if you are here for the first time, okay, or you're a person who normally doesn't associate with churches, or you're spiritually curious, you're invited to chime in too, okay? So take some swings if you want, all right? So what are some words that come to your mind?
Unnecessary opulence.
What's that? Unnecessary opulence. What does that mean? Okay. Grandeur and opulence. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes? Okay. Yes. Or, yeah. Exactly. Anyone else? Good food. All right. Yeah. She goes to the right church. Okay. What else? Fighting in the car, smiling at church. Yeah. Okay. What else makes you think of, that's good, of worship? Okay. When you hear the word church, what comes to your mind? Boring. Thank you very much. Okay. So, anything else? Quick. A few more. Football scores. Anyone else? Oh, you have to fix yourself before you can go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Judgment. Yep. Okay. These are good. These are real. You know. These are a few more people. When average people think of church, sometimes they think of a church building. Okay, a thing you go to on Sundays, maybe the longest hour of the week. Okay, an institution for people with overactive consciences. How do you say that? Anyway, a social club, maybe a place that helps people out. A place that does weddings and funerals, a place that cares for the poor, hypocrites, self-righteous, anti-gay, judgmentalism, you mentioned that, self-serving, mindless. Some people think that church people are mindless. They don't know how to think, and, they have a crutch with faith. Irrational, maybe the cause of problems or pain. Sincere, joyful, fake. Someone said boring. Good people, painful, too political. All these things come to different people's minds when they hear the word church, all right? And everything that just about everything we've mentioned just in these few minutes, I've experienced in being part of a church, and at some points of my life, I've been those people. I've been judgmental. I've been self-righteous. I've been hypocritical. I've been self-serving. I have hurt people, unfortunately, and I have been hurt by people as well. And these are just things that happen. But we have all, I think, been either unclear on what church is about, or have experienced or seen the negative and downright ugly when it comes to church. Yet for some reason, we're all here today, right? That's kind of cool, all right? But things get lost in translation. And the church that we see today, not necessarily the journey, okay, but the church as a whole, is not how it began, and is not quite what was originally intended. If it was originally intended to be like a lot of us have experienced in the past, then something is horrifically off. And maybe, you'd rather eat your cereal with sour, chunky milk every week than attend church as often, But in this series, we're going to look at the church, is what we're going to do, and try to identify what kinds of things have gotten lost in translation and what we can do about it, because we can do a lot about it. We're going to look at what is church, why does it exist, and who came up with the funny word anyway, church. It just sounds so churchy. We don't use that word in any other part of our language except when we refer to church. I don't know. What is church supposed to be like? Who is it for? Who can participate? Who can't? What are people really supposed to experience? Who came up, with the idea of church? Is it really God's idea, or is it another way that people came up with to try to control other people? Heck, who needs church anyway if you can have a God experience somewhere out in the woods sitting on a log where a bear just pooped, looking at nature and say, oh, yeah, hey. Who needs church if you can have an experience like that, right? Then you look at things in the Bible where we find Jesus talking about building his church. And then a little while later, Paul the Apostle saying that God doesn't dwell in temples made by human hands. And some people are like, well, okay, what's it's all supposed to look like? And so I invite you to join with us for this ride, because we're going to look at it for the next several weeks. And what we discuss here will determine the steps that we choose to take from here. It's my hope that this series will get you thinking, examining, praying, maybe looking in the mirror, and inspired to pursue something much better than each one of us has experienced even so far when it comes to church. And whether you've been churched all your life, or whether you're with us for the first time and consider yourself non-religious, I hope this inspires you. Because, by the way, we don't really consider ourselves very religious here either. Otherwise, I wouldn't have shown that offensive Jesus video clip, right? Anyway, so the title of the talk this morning is Irresistible Beginnings. Now, when I say the word, or when I think of the word irresistible, I think of good things. Falling in love with the right person is something that's kind of irresistible, right? The smile and innocence of a child, that's irresistible, wouldn't you say? Who can resist that, especially the kids cute? A glass of cold water in summertime is irresistible. A warm fireplace in the winter is irresistible. The smell of a rack of glazed ribs barbecuing is irresistible. That is irresistible. Okay, lots of chocolate, irresistible. In-N-Out burger is very irresistible. Anyway, so, but the church was like that in the beginning. It was irresistible. Not just irresistible to churched people, but to unchurched people as well. And that's a key here. And we're going to look at a Bible passage. It'll be on the screen right now. It says this. And this is when it just got launched and things were happening. A deep sense of awe came over them all. And the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together constantly and shared everything they had. They sold their possessions and shared the proceeds with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple each day, met in homes, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill or the favor of all the people. Okay? That's speaking of unchurched people. They were enjoying favor with everybody. Okay? And each day, the Lord added to their group those who were being saved. There was something happening at that time that was irresistible. That people were just flocking. They're like, whoa, what's going on here? This is kind of crazy. This is kind of cool. I want to be part of this. This is really neat, okay? And, I love how one person said it. He said this: in the beginning, the church was a gloriously messy movement with a laser-focused message and a global mission, And it's true. They knew who they were. They knew what they were about and where they were going. The love and the generosity that the people had were irresistible. The message that they proclaimed was irresistibly good news. This new church movement was led by men and women who were fueled not just by what they believed, but by what they had seen. Okay? And that was key. That alone sets a church apart from every other religious system in history. It wasn't the teaching of Jesus that moved these people to the streets or to action. In fact, they didn't understand half of what Jesus said anyway. Okay? It was what they saw. It was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. It's something that people don't see every day. And the people in the early church weren't simply, adhering to the latest and greatest philosophical ideas. They weren't just like coffee house junkies just kind of talking about, oh, hey, whatever. Okay? The beginnings were powerful and basically irresistible. And since then, something seems to have gotten lost in the translation. They weren't people who were just following a good leader. A lot of people follow good leaders, great leaders. They had seen something. They had experienced something that changed them. And, but something's gotten lost in translation. So what happened? And to answer that, we're going to spend the next few minutes in a little bit of a history lesson. So I hope you're okay with that. I hope you're a little bit more like my wife than you are like me, okay? Wendy loves history. She just soaks it up. When I was in college, I'd sit in the back row, spread myself across 5 chairs, and sleep for an hour. And it was a little embarrassing at times when class dismissed before I got up. I woke up, But anyway, that was just me. So I'll try to make this interesting for you. If you want to take notes, there's a green sheet in your handout you can take notes with if you'd like. So let's look at this. The movement that stopped moving, okay? The church was a movement that stopped moving. First point there is the existence of the church is not natural. I want to mention this. And I don't know how much you know about or have thought about the church or how or how the church got here today. Maybe you're like most people. You were born, you grew up, there's always been a church somewhere, and that's all you know, okay? And you haven't really thought a whole lot about it. But in reality, when you look at history, the birth and the survival and growth of the church is absolutely amazing. It's phenomenal. It's really unexplainable. The reason is that there is no a natural explanation as for why the church survived the first century, let alone the last 20 centuries. Okay, there's really no natural explanation. And I would say that it's not just not natural, but maybe even supernatural, maybe even a miracle. Okay, now think about it. It started with a small group of Jewish nonconformists who defied a political superpower, Rome, and a religious system that had been in place for 1,000 years, and in the end, won. Okay? It was a movement that began as grassroots as you can get, originally referred to as the Way. Okay, that's what they used to be called, these people. It began with a Jewish carpenter who spoke mostly parables that people didn't quite get. He taught that people should love their political enemies and pay their taxes. That's not very good teaching, He seemed to favor poor people over the rich, which is not a very good way to fund your movement. He offended almost everybody, including those closest to him. His family thought that he had lost his mind. And after only 3 years of public ministry, he was arrested, humiliated, and executed. Not a way to start a movement, okay? If you're looking to, for qualifications on your book, how to be successful and have lots of friends, that's not the way to do it. And it gets even stranger. After Jesus' execution, his stressed out, fearful, and discouraged followers began to claim that he rose from the dead and that they had seen him and touched him and spoke to him and ate with him. And within weeks, dozens and then hundreds of people within walking distance of where Jesus' tomb was began saying the same thing and began spreading that bit of news to people. Within about a month and a half, that number grew to over 3,000 people. And in spite of the same resistance that crucified Jesus Christ, and in spite of ensuing executions for following Christ, this church continued to grow way beyond Jerusalem and throughout much of the Roman Empire. And not only did it survive the first century, but also the next 2 centuries after that, where intense Roman persecution had broken out against Christians because the followers of Christ claimed that Jesus was their king and not the Roman Caesar, simply because of that. Okay? And so big-time persecution came out. But after 3 centuries, this Jewish knockoff religion called the Way, which should have been squelched, became the primary belief system of that same Roman Empire that tried to wipe it out. The church survived then for the next 1,200 years in spite of incredible religious corruption. And today, over a third of the world's entire population claims some kind of faith in Jesus Christ. Rome is long gone. Ancient Judaism died in the first century when the temple was destroyed in the year 70. But today, over 2 billion people claim Jesus as a centerpiece of their religious experience. Whoa. How do you explain that, right? Jesus taught for 3 years and is now worshipped on every continent on the planet. It doesn't quite add up. So let's look a little bit closer at what happened at the very first time that church was ever mentioned. So the next point here is the church was founded on the identity of Jesus Christ. Okay, one day during a time when Jesus was alive and gaining popularity, he asked his followers who people thought that he was. Okay, his disciples fired back several responses that they had heard. Everything from a good teacher to the prophet Elijah coming back from the dead, And then Jesus asked them, "What about you? Who do you say that I am?" And immediately Simon Peter pipes up and he says, "You are the Christ. You are the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God." And here's what Jesus said after that. He said, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. So this is the first time that the word church shows up in the New Testament. Jesus predicted that he would build it and that nothing, even hell, would stand in the way. Amazing to think that every time we meet, we're in a modern day fulfillment of Jesus' words 2,000 years ago. Kind of like, whoa, how do you know that? But when Jesus made that statement, when he said, on this rock I will build my church, he was saying that the foundation of this new thing called the church was the revelation given to Peter about who Jesus is, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay? This is why churches are always talking about Jesus. Okay? It's the reason, for the joke that, if you're new to a church and someone asks you a question, just say Jesus, and you're good. What's your name? Jesus. Really? Oh, that's kind of cool. I don't know. But I mean, it's about Jesus. The identity of Jesus as a Savior, the Son of God, is foundational to the church and is really about the only thing that unites every other church around this world. Okay? Now, most people, when speaking in conversation, refer to church as a place, as I mentioned before. Somewhere to go on Sundays. Where do you go to church? Do you go to church? Right? Well, yes, I go to church. I am going to church tomorrow. Oh, cool. Where do you go to church? And there's this going, place you go to. Or it's referred to as a building. What does your church look like? Oh, is it the green one or the brick one or the brown one? It's a small one or the big one. We think of a church building. Is it the ugly one or is it the cool one? Does your church have a youth room or a bathroom? And all these things, it doesn't have either. It has an organ, though. What's an organ? Okay. But this is what people in our culture think or talk about when it comes to church. Then they might go on and talk about singing songs that they don't really understand, or some guy in a suit that gets all worked up about sinners, right? But those kinds of things. Let's look at this next point. The church is not a building. It's a gathering of people for a specific purpose. Okay, and here's where things started getting lost in translation over a word. In that same statement where Jesus first mentioned church, Jesus used an interesting word in the Greek because that was the language that he spoke, and that was the language that was written originally in the New Testament. The word he used was ekklesia. I think it'll be on the screen. There you go. Thanks. And what that is an assembly of people called out for a specific purpose, usually to extend some sort of influence or even to rule. It was a word that was used in the Greek, or used to describe Greek or Roman citizens who were called out to help govern maybe a city or a town or a district. And ecclesia never referred to a specific place or building. It referred to a gathering of people united by a common identity and purpose. And there are a number of reasons I mention this. One is technical, maybe even a bit nerdy, but it's important. Speaking of something lost in translation, ecclesia doesn't translate into our word church, even though our Bibles say church, okay? It translates into a gathering of people, as I just mentioned. So why do our Bibles use the word church? I'm so glad you asked, because you're also interested right now, okay? And this is part of the reason that this irresistible movement kind of stopped moving and became, instead, an establishment. In the 4th century, in about 320s, right in there, Constantine, he became the emperor of Rome. And just before he became the emperor of Rome, he, for, I can't remember what reason, he put his faith in Jesus Christ. He became a follower of Christ. And so when he became the emperor of Rome, guess what he did? First of all, he said there's now freedom of religion here in the Roman Empire. Woo! People are excited. Second of all, the national religion is now Christianity. Okay? Woo! Maybe. All right? And so that's what happened. Now, what happened is, within about 10 years, the grassroots movement called the church was then organized and institutionalized thanks to the Roman government, who thought they were doing a good thing. There was a common practice, for example, that, the gathering people of church, to commemorate the anniversary of a martyr's death, they would sometimes have a worship service or communion at or near the grave of that martyr. Well, the Roman government, who are now Christians, saw that. Well, why do that? Let's just build a building. Let's build a structure here. And now we can all meet here all the time. And so gradually, the church, this movement of people, became centered around a building, and then another building, and a real nice one, and and so forth. Does that make sense? You're following what happened? So the Roman elite, they took that to a whole new level, and they started building elaborate buildings and cathedrals in those places. In a short amount of time, ecclesia ceased to become an expanding movement of people sharing a unique purpose and identity, and it had become a location. And the Roman word for it was basilica. Now, German cultures used the word Kirche, which became modern-day Kirche in German, modern Germany. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Kirche. And that word meant house of the Lord, and was used to refer to any religious gathering place. And it's that Germanic term that became the one used most often referred to as the ecclesia of Jesus, and that's where the German word is, from Kirche we get church. Does that make sense? Okay, and if you want me to repeat all that, you can go online and you can listen to it. But that's how we got the word church. It's actually a German term, and it was used to refer to a building. Now, there's a whole other story of, okay, I'll go on with what I'm saying here. So, whereas most of our English New Testaments are accurately translated word for word from the Greek text, the word church isn't. It's not even a translation. It's a bad substitution is what it is. Because ecclesia and Kirche refer to two different things. You follow me on that? It's like calling something a chair and a table and trying to say it's the same thing, and it's not. But words have meanings, and so the church became synonymous with a location. And at the time, whoever then controlled the church building now controlled the church people. And those who controlled the church people and the church buildings then controlled the scriptures and controlled, of course, those in it. And for the next 1,000 to 1,200 years, corrupt and evil people distorted and turned something that began as an irresistible movement into an ugly, power-grabbing, hierarchical, ritualized institution that committed vile acts of terrorism, including things like the Crusades and the Inquisitions and so forth, all in the name of its founder, Jesus Christ. Okay, twisted, lost in translation. And what's incredible is that the church, what's more incredible actually than that the church survived the first century is that they survived the next, 10 in this, okay? But it did, and it survived just as Jesus promised. And I wish I had the time to talk about the reformers of the 16th century who risked their lives to challenge the powers that were at the time just to get the Bible into the hands of everyday people, okay? I mean, people like Tyndale were killed for trying to translate the Bible into the modern language and get it out to the people. They were killed by the church, okay? So if you are here today and if you've ever been wounded by a church person, not really, compared to what other people were, okay? I don't want to minimize that because we've all been, but still. But long story short, the church, lost in translation, is still trying to find its identity and purpose today, and is still confusing Kirche with ecclesia in its purpose and actions. Making sense? Okay. Next, side note I want to say. Some Christians who swing the pendulum and react to things will use information like this to argue against the need for church buildings, for example. Okay, and you might be wondering, really? Yeah, I've met people like that. But they miss a point because church buildings and structures are needed. Okay, for the simple piece of reality called weather. Okay, because of something called weather, we need a roof and some walls. And it'd be nice to have a heater and a bathroom and, so forth, okay? Some people say, well, they should just meet in homes because they used to meet in homes. That's all great. But if you want to have a healthy church, healthy churches, irresistible, like back then in the Bible, grow. And unless you can afford to add on to your house, you're going to outgrow unless you want a church of we four no more, right? And so, does that make sense? So church buildings are needed, but they're a tool. They're not the identity. They're not the, they're not the identity. They're not what it's all about. It's the people. So, how do we get this irresistible movement irresistible and moving again? How do we do that? How does this apply to the journey? I want us to move forward and, as a church and not just have services. I want us to see us create an irresistible environment as we move forward with an irresistible love, an irresistible message, an irresistible life. Wouldn't you want that? That's how church should be. That's what Jesus designed it to be. So let's look at regaining traction, okay? Which, by the way, what's the score of the Seahawks game right now? Anybody know? What's that? Oh, shh. Oh, for those who are waiting, you might be DVRing it. Okay, that's right. Okay, I'll pass that. Okay, so regaining traction. Who would agree that traction is important for movement of any kind? Okay, it's a big reality right now. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, unless of course you like to spin donuts in an empty snow-covered parking lot like me. Traction is important. Someone told me this week that a friend saw this kid drive into an empty parking lot and start spinning donuts right into a cop car that was parked there. Yeah, live and learn, right? There's a time when I was a youth pastor, and our church had this little airport shuttle type bus for the youth, and it had like 22 people, and so I had my CDL, and I'm driving, and we went up skiing up to Bear Valley in California, and I won't tell you all about getting pulled over twice by the same cop, but by the time we got up there, we had to put chains on because it was just icy and slippery and snowy and all that. Well, get up there, and the parking lot is kind of this slope, and the problem on that day was that there was about 2 inches of ice that covered the entire parking lot. Okay, it was like a slanted ice rink. And so I drive on that bus. I've got chains on it. It didn't matter. I'm driving down, and I'm like, oh no. And people are parking their brand new SUVs with their brand new skis and snowboards, and they're getting out. And I'm like, turning the wheel, and it's just going in the same direction slowly. It doesn't really matter which way. And I'm just like stiff like this, and I'm looking, and people are realizing, they're like, they're big eyes. It was just classic. I would have laughed had I not been so scared. Thankfully, I didn't hit anybody. But you understand the necessity of traction to move forward, right? To do anything. Some of you with rear-wheel drive cars are going to have a heck of a time getting out of the parking lot today. But traction is needed to move forward. Traction is about having a firm grip on the surface that you want to move on. Okay, so how do we gain traction? Let's look at a couple of quick points here. First of all, understand the big picture, okay, about church. And we have to understand what ecclesia is about, what Jesus came to start and why. And this is what we're going to talk about in the series coming up. But ever since the beginning of life on this planet, it's part of the big picture, humanity has been guilty of a nasty little thing called sin. We started off in perfect relationship with God, the creator of and lover of our souls, but then something happened, and we got prideful, and we started going our own way and far away from God. And as a result, our world is a mess, and all you have to do is open your eyes and see. Turn on the news, whatever you need to do. Just look in the mirror. And the problem, okay, and that sin that we're all guilty of, that sin, it ruins life more than the ugliest of diseases that are anywhere in this world. It's that sin in our hearts that destroys. It separates us from God. And not only have those sins separated us from God, but they have destroyed and ruled our lives as well. And the problem is a spiritual problem that affects and has a dire spiritual and physical consequences in our lives. Jesus came to restore what's been destroyed. And it's called his church, this ecclesia, to join him in that mission. Okay? Ecclesia is a gathering of people called out for a specific purpose, and one of which is to extend influence or rule, okay? Not in the way of like, the old Roman church or jihadists or whatever. No, the extent of the rule of God in our hearts. Because God is not one that says, submit or die, No. He says, will you receive my love? And let me into your heart. And as we open up to him, he changes what's inside as we submit to his authority. And we realize that God, heaven is perfect. Everyone's like, I want to go to heaven. Well, in heaven, God is ruling, okay? He has complete authority. And in heaven, sin is not allowed to exist, okay? There's no disease either. There's no death. There's no pain. There's all these good things. Why? Because God, his will, his rule, is being executed perfectly up there. And as we open our hearts to him, we get to experience some of that in our lives today. The more we yield to him, the more we experience. You following? And to extend the rule of God means, let me tell you about somebody I know. His name is Jesus Christ, and here's what he's done for me. And as someone else opens up. Are you following me on that? That ecclesia has a mission and a purpose to bring about restoration of humanity to God through Jesus Christ. Okay? You following? And it's powerful. That's in a nutshell, big picture. Okay? Big picture. We're invited to be a significant part of that mission, to influence people to God through Christ, breaking people free from the grip of sin and the grip of hell that currently rules their life. Okay? It goes from being submitted to one thing that rules, to saying, I want to be broken of that. And therefore I'm going to be submitted to God, who's a whole lot better than this sin that I can't control. Okay? It's destroying my life. We're invited to be part of that. And next, how else we gain traction? Experience the resurrected one. Okay? Now, the first Christ followers had an advantage in a lot of ways. They saw the resurrected Jesus. They touched him, they spoke to him, they heard him, they experienced him. And though it's not the same for us in the physical dynamic, we can and we need to experience the risen Christ in our lives today. And if you're a Christ follower, you need to experience him. If you're not a Christ follower, I invite you to find out what it is to experience him. Because he's real. To know him, to hear his voice, to walk closely with him, to be filled and empowered by him, to live what he's called us to live. It's not just about moving forward with a belief. It's about moving forward because we have experienced Jesus Christ. And now we want to tell people what we have seen, that we have heard, just like the first followers of Christ did. That's why worship is so important. What Mike does every Sunday up here and leads us in, and what Paul does on occasion up here. That's why prayer is so important. That's why reading our Bibles is important. That's why gathering together is important. We need to experience a resurrected one on whom we identify with, on whom ecclesia is built. And if you're an unchurched person or if you're a church person, call out to him. Say, I want to know you and I want to experience you, God. Do it. And keep doing it. Keep praying that. And you will experience him because he's real. Last, become irresistible. Some of us today can look in the mirror. A lot of us, probably, just be honest, we don't feel very irresistible. We feel pretty resistible, I think. God wants to turn us into something that's irresistible. Not prideful to puff us up and, oh, man, check that out. No, not like anything like that, but irresistible people, okay? As we truly experience him and submit to him, he will make us irresistible. When we begin to give ourselves to repair a broken world, to heal the hurting, to love the unlovable, to strengthen the weak and give hope to the hopeless, there's something irresistible in that that we can take part in. Just as irresistible as heaven is, where God's rule is in full force, when we live our lives in submission to God, people see that and are attracted to it. Something that, as we close here, about the irresistible beginnings of that first church that we can learn from. I read that part earlier where it says that they gathered together and they sold things and they experienced the favor of all the people. That part, they were all in. Those people, they weren't half-hearted. They were all in. Make sense? They were all in. And being all in is risky. Emotionally, I'm all in with the 49ers, and that's risky because they could lose. Right? But it's not nearly as risky as being all in when we're talking about something called ecclesia or church. That's what Jesus calls us to. Are you all in? Because if you can be all in, he'll make you irresistible. Totally and completely. And there's no reason that we could ever be the same. Let's stand. Got to get us out to see the Seahawks game. And get our kids. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this funny thing called church. Really, ecclesia. Gathering of people. Jesus, that you predicted would happen. And here we are today. Thank you that we get to be part of it. It's such a privilege. May we experience the fullness of it. May we experience the fullness of what you have for us as we jump in. And I pray, God, that just for every person here, that you would just deepen our understanding, even of what it is and what it isn't. That you would help us to, especially those who are Christ followers, to be all in, to understand the big picture, to so we can gain traction, Lord God, to know the resurrected one. I pray for, God, any person here who doesn't know you, Jesus, that you would make yourself known, that we might be changed. And I pray that you would make us, as people, as individuals, and as the journey, a group of people, a gathering, a movement that is irresistible, that creates an irresistible environment so that unchurched people